All right, how's it going again, guys? I think it might be time to kind of go a little bit more into personal details about myself, just so you kind of get a feel for my artistic tastes and kind of my personality. Yeah, I'm a millennial, and I was the youngest of three kids, and I had five stepbrothers. I have five stepbrothers. So I would say that actually I kind of grew up more like Gen X. I mean, obviously not. There are things about that generation that just are not possible to pertain to me, but I really think that more of my personality is more in line with that generation, that culture, and those types of people, that kind of mentality, just because I was exposed to it from a very young age and I grew up with it. And it was always something that kind of bothered me about, people in my generation and stuff, because it kind of feels like Gen X was the last generation that had any kind of real soul to it, whereas millennials just kind of got thrown into this little bit of a fire heap. And so, like, we're scrambling to kind of, basically, we have an identity crisis on our hands, because we grew up and we were born in a time when you had VHS tapes, and now we're coming into our own as the old people, the older people, so to speak. And there's all these new things that have come out, and even though we're a little bit tech savvy, we're not really we're in that transitionary period between generations, and that kind of causes a lot of confusion, I think, from a cultural standpoint. But needless to say, a lot of my tastes are stuff that Gen X people for sure are gonna like. Like, some of my favorite bands include Alice in Chains, Tool for sure. I mean, I kind of got into them late in life, but I would say the band that I really like the most, if I had to actually pinpoint it down to one favorite band group, it would probably have to be The Cult. Just because the way that they mix genres together, and kind of Ian Astbury, the lead singer, his experience with Native American culture, and just kind of how he blends it all together with the gothic themes, the hard rock, the kind of stuff that's actually adjacent to biker culture, actually, believe it or not, despite the fact that these guys are from the UK, is something that just, like, really, I just think it's like, to me, it's the most perfect band ever, honestly. If I had to have a favorite one, because I don't know if I do necessarily, but that's probably where I would place my bets. Likewise, with, like, entertainment and film and television, I don't really have a favorite, just because it depends on what kind of mood and situation you're in and where you're coming from at any given particular time, so it can ebb and flow. But I've already mentioned before that I'm part Norwegian, so I grew up with the Lord of the Rings big time. My mom was the one that introduced me to this, and here's the interesting thing about that. Ever since I started really getting into my ancestry and my ethnic roots, I think it's fair to say that everybody probably retains some kind of vestige from their ancestry without even realizing it. I guess Carl Jung called it ancestral memories. But anyways, where I'm going with this is, as it turns out, my mom's never been into the Vikings or anything, but Lord of the Rings is like, it's 95% Norse mythology. Like, if you look into it, most of the names, like the names of the dwarves and stuff, are actually names that are derived from the Havamal, the Norse book of Proverbs. And my mom's never, like, read into any of this. I think she got across Lord of the Rings in her college days, and she just kind of got into it. And so I was introduced to it. I actually saw the 70s animated movies before I had a chance to see the film. And I saw The Fellowship of the Ring with my mom in theaters, and I could kind of tell from the beginning that I was already familiar with the source material. And then, of course, you fast forward to many years in the present by about a couple decades, and I started to realize that actually it has a lot of, it is basically a transposed Norse mythology. I'm also into Star Wars, not the new movies. Those are shit, let's be honest with that. That's a bunch of propagandist crap. Yeah, the old Star Wars is where it's at. The Empire Strikes Back, one of the best films of all time. I don't even think that's an opinion. What else? A lot of Steven Spielberg shit, you know. Yeah. So those things for sure. Now, television. This one I kind of had to ease into. I had a reluctance to get into Breaking Bad because some of those, I was already exposed to the drug world, and I had friends who were drug addicts who died. And, one incident in particular in my early 20s is something that I got caught up in, and it caused me some legal headaches, and it was all around bad. It created a domino effect of shit for me that thankfully I'm mostly past. But, yeah, it was kind of a hard sell at first, but I took a chance on it, and ever since I did, just watching the first episode, just the way that the show is designed, I got immediately hooked. And I've watched that series so many times. I own both Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. Vince Gilligan described the show as being like Breaking Bad is a southern phrase for saying someone is losing their way and their character is degenerating and they're becoming a monster, which the show does pretty well in terms of telling Walter White's story and the motives for why he got into a world of crime from being a timid high school chemistry teacher. Each character also has their own addictions. The sister-in-law, Skyler, the wife's sister, is a kleptomaniac. Hank is a power freak. He wants control. He wants authority. He wants power. He wants recognition for what he does as a federal agent of the DEA. Obviously, there's Walter White. He wants security for his family. He wants money to be able to take care of his financial woes, something he's never really dealt with before in his whole entire life, his mediocre life, despite the fact that he came up with this great innovation that, his friends kind of stabbed him in the back over and created that company and blah, blah, blah. Mike Ehrmantraut, probably one of my favorite characters from that show. He's really the only guy that has a consistent moral compass. So he's addicted to a moral code out of everybody else. Jesse becomes what people describe as being the only character that really becomes better, while everyone else tends to become kind of worse. But then you have someone like Mike who stays consistent throughout the show. Yeah, but key parts of the Breaking Bad show that really hit home, especially that scene with the girlfriend Jane and how she overdoses in her sleep and everything that kind of comes from that. In my early 20s, when I turned about 21, I had a friend of mine who I kind of saw, I was involved with, that all happened and everything. And without, it's kind of a bad situation I don't really want to ruminate on, because I've already spent so much time in anguish and shit kind of going through it. But I will say this about Breaking Bad and maybe move on from here, is that the big takeaway about that show, more than the characters' addictions and more about the fact that the series is designed to be very addictive for the viewer, the audience, casual or otherwise. That show is really about a surrogate father and son love story. It's about people that are intertwined and kind of the ebbs and flows they go through in their relationships, but how it ultimately comes together in the worst of times. And I will say that's the greatest takeaway for me with regards to that show. And it's the reason why that show is going to go with me to the grave. That'll always be a part of me and in the deepest chasm of my heart. Politically, I'm probably what you would call a conservative-leaning independent. I've lived in both Democrat and Republican jurisdictions. I don't think any part of the country should be solidly colored either way. I don't believe in political parties. I think political parties are bullshit. I think we're better off exploring more of the idea of coalitions, or if we're going to have political parties, the political parties need to be reined in to such a degree where they're not able to operate like they're immune and above the average Joe. Like, that's not right. So I guess when people say like lobbying and special interests and all the other shit should be made illegal or severely regulated. I would tend to agree with that. I have become very patriotic of this country, and I refuse to subscribe to the notion of, this popular thing on social media, and especially a place like TikTok, the cesspool that is. I refuse to accept that because this country has imperfect histories or imperfect foundations, that it's automatically across the board evil and wrong and needs to be thrown out like spoiled rotten fruit. Like I don't believe in that, man. I don't think anyone that has anything to do with motorcycles believes that I'm gonna ride a bike or whatever. I'm gonna get into motorcycle culture. And but I really hate the United States. It's evil and rotten, and it needs to be dismantled. So no, I don't subscribe to that bullshit either myself. I will defend this country against any of you motherfuckers out there that want to talk shit and hate on it or whatever. You can criticize it all day you want to. If you want to hate Donald Trump or whatever, fine. But don't try to attack the country and lump everything in with your toxic narratives. I'm not going to have that. I've tried several times to get into the U.S. military. I tried enlisting unsuccessfully into the Air Force, and then from that I tried to get into through the officer route through ROTC. So I was, in fact, an officer candidate. I did go through some officer training. I would say that I've had a series of bumps in the road where I've done a lot of exploration of things, and I just haven't really committed myself to pushing through. So that's just something that I'm kind of I'm a work in progress over. But yeah, and needless to say, I have a lot of friends who are ex-military. I work with veterans even in a professional capacity. I'm technically a home caregiver for veterans. So yeah, I do those kind of things, and I'm not ashamed to say it. So yeah, I'm just going to put that out there. I would probably say that the motorcycle thing got started when I was in high school, which was a long time ago, honestly. And I had this leather jacket at school, and there was a girl there that said that I looked like a biker, which I found to be kind of interesting. A few years after that, I ended up watching, I heard that the Sons of Anarchy show was great. And so, yeah, I did watch Sons of Anarchy. I sat through it. I would say that show has some really great aspects to it. They did a really good job of certain things. But then there's the other half of the show that's just complete crap and was sloppily put together and is really a bore fest. Like, you have to fight your urge to sleep through it. So I neither love nor hate that show. I just think that, it could have probably been cut down quite a lot more and it would have been a lot better. So I mentioned before that I have a college education. So professionally, I've done some blue collar work as well. I haven't been afraid to, use my hands. I worked for a year and a half at the Denver Public Transit Agency. They call it the Regional Transportation District for anyone who doesn't live here. I didn't do anything special. I just cleaned the buses. But I did that. I have done some transportation jobs, nothing special. I used to have a Class B CDL, so I was able to operate buses if I wanted to do that. I've driven box truck, delivering auto supplies in the mountains. I briefly got away from Colorado because it was so expensive, and I'm probably going to end up leaving the state permanently the next time I do it. I'm going to save up some money because of the political horse shit and just the social decay that's been going on around here. Anyone who denies it's delusional. But that aside, so I went out to Wyoming, where I'm actually originally from, and I worked construction for about 3 years. I was out in Wyoming for a total of 4, but I ended up working construction for about 3, and I did 2 construction jobs. I worked in a fencing company with a guy who was missing most of his teeth, we'll put it that way, and had a horrible attitude, and everyone in town actually knew he was kind of a major asshole, so that didn't really work out beyond the summer months. But then I went and did one of what was, for the most part, at least for the first 2 years of it, one of the best jobs I ever had, and that was working in the concrete industry. And my boss there was actually twice deployed veteran of the Iraq War. And his right-hand man was a Vietnam-era former Navy guy who did just about everything except try out for SEAL and try out for BUDS and Seabees, the engineering wing of the Navy. But yeah, I had a great time with those guys. I learned some things. It didn't end very well. That's kind of a story for another time, but that's kind of, I would say that the experiences that I had and the culture that was fostered and kind of just working with your hands and building things and knowing that you're actually contributing to America's infrastructure was the thing that really solidified in my mind. That was the breaking point in time, which everything kind of came together. And the idea of wanting a motorcycle and to kind of get into all that really just clicked. Like the light bulb just flickered at that point. So that was a lengthy video, lengthy rant I've ever done. Probably the longest that I've done to date. But that's kind of a brief overview as to brief little bits and pieces of my history of kind of why I'm into certain things and how I ultimately ended up here. So that'll be happening, and I thank all of you for being willing to listen and follow along with me and you know, build the empire that I'm looking to get into. I'll just close by saying that I'm not new to social media or anything. It's just this is the first time I put myself in front of a camera, so now there's probably tens of thousands of strangers I'm never gonna meet at this point in time that now know what I look and sound like. So I'll be making other videos, but you know, when I can and when time allows and all the other stuff. But yeah, I just figured this would be kind of an icebreaker moment now. Later, bye.